Hello. Hi, how are you? Pretty good, pretty good. Just getting my nails done. What you up to? Oh, nothing. Just responding to all your claims and accusations. No, it's accusations that you think this will be a positive thing for your life.
A positive thing to be pregnant.
Yeah, or no, just having kids with situations that aren't promising for your children.
Come again?
Having kids in situations that aren't promising for your children.
That's not prophecy.
You said that's not
So
what?
why are you sitting here and nutting at people if it's not promising for nobody?
The internet did not just react, it absolutely lost its mind. We're talking full-blown chaos, timelines shaking, comment sections turning into war zones, and everybody suddenly becoming a financial expert overnight. Because somehow, someway, Blueface just dropped a statement so wild, so casually controversial, it hit social media like a shockwave nobody saw coming. And the craziest part? He said it like it was no big deal at all. So here's where everything spiraled out of control. Blueface straight up made it clear he wasn't paying, and not in a let me explain the situation type of way. No, this was delivered with confidence, energy, and just enough attitude to send people into immediate outrage. Within seconds, clips started flying across TikTok. Reposts flooded Twitter, and suddenly everybody had something to say about what he meant, why he said it, and what it says about him. But if you thought the internet was just going to argue quietly, oh, absolutely not. Because before the conversation could even settle, the baby mama stepped in. And when we say she clapped back, we mean she didn't just respond. She flipped the entire narrative upside down. Now, the situation wasn't just controversial. It was explosive. Two sides, two stories, and a million opinions colliding all at once. And just like that, it stopped being a simple statement and turned into a full-blown online battle. Fans split into teams instantly. Critics started digging into past behavior. And people began connecting dots that maybe weren't even meant to be connected. Old drama resurfaced like it had been waiting for this exact moment. And suddenly, this wasn't just about not paying anymore. Because now the real question started echoing across the internet louder than anything else. Is this just another moment of reckless talk? Or is there something deeper going on behind the scenes that people haven't fully caught yet? And if that clapback really exposed more than it seemed, then this situation isn't just messy. It's about to get way worse now to really understand why the internet didn't just react but completely spiraled. You have to go back before this moment even happened. Because this wasn't just one statement that triggered everything. This was built on years of chaos, controversy, and a reputation that already had people watching closely. Blueface has never exactly been known for quiet, calculated moves, and that unpredictability is exactly what makes every situation involving him explode faster than normal. So when he spoke this time, people weren't hearing it in isolation. They were hearing it through everything they already knew about him from the start. His public image has always been tied to drama that feels more like reality television than real life. Relationships turning into headlines, arguments becoming viral clips, and personal situations playing out in front of millions like it's a live broadcast. And every time things looked like they might settle down, something new would happen that pulled everything right back into chaos. That pattern created an audience that doesn't just watch, anticipates, waiting for the next moment to drop. Then came the baby mama dynamic, which added an entirely new layer to the situation. Because now, it wasn't just about viral moments or online drama. It involved real-life responsibilities that people take seriously. And once you bring that into the public space, the expectations change instantly. People don't just react for entertainment anymore. They start forming opinions about right and wrong in a much stronger way. That shift is exactly what made this situation feel heavier than previous ones. Over time, tension had already been building in subtle ways that most people didn't fully notice at first. Small comments, indirect remarks, and moments that seemed minor individually started stacking up in the background. Fans picked up on the energy even if they couldn't fully explain it yet. And when that kind of tension builds quietly, it usually leads to a moment where everything comes out at once. This situation became that moment. So when Blueface finally made that statement about not paying, it didn't feel random to the audience. It felt like the release of everything that had been building underneath the surface for a long time. And because people were already watching closely, the reaction came instantly and aggressively. Nobody waited for context. Nobody paused to process. They reacted in real time with full intensity. That's exactly how things go, from controversial to explosive in seconds, within minutes. The clip started circulating everywhere like it had a life of its own. Different edits, different captions, different angles. Each one pushing a slightly different narrative depending on who was posting it. Some framed it as confidence, others framed it as irresponsibility, and a few turned it into pure entertainment. But regardless of the angle, one thing was clear. It was spreading fast and it wasn't slowing down. Then came the first wave of reactions. And this is where things started getting loud. Supporters showed up quickly, defending him and arguing that people didn't have the full context. They claimed the internet was jumping to conclusions, exaggerating the situation, and turning it into something bigger than it actually was. That side of the conversation focused on perspective, suggesting there was more to the story that hadn't been explained yet. And for a moment, it looked like that argument might hold. But that moment didn't last long because the critics responded, even louder. They didn't just disagree, they challenged everything about the statement and what it represented. Questions started flooding in about responsibility, priorities, and the message it sends publicly. And once those questions hit the timeline, they didn't go away, they multiplied. The conversation went from a simple reaction to a full breakdown of the situation in real time. At this point, the internet wasn't just reacting, it was building narratives. People started interpreting the statement in different ways, creating their own explanations and theories. Some believed it was taken out of context, others believed it revealed exactly what needed to be seen. And because there was no immediate clarification, both sides kept growing stronger. That's what happens when a situation is left open to interpretation. And just when it felt like the conversation had reached its peak, everything flipped completely. Because the baby mama didn't stay silent and let the internet decide the narrative. Instead, she stepped in with a response that shifted the entire energy of the situation instantly. This wasn't a quiet or subtle reaction. It was direct, confident, and strong enough to grab everyone's attention. Her response didn't just address the statement. It challenged it in a way that forced people to reconsider everything they had just heard. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't one-sided anymore. It became a back-and-forth situation with two perspectives colliding publicly. And when both sides are speaking, the internet doesn't calm down. It gets louder. People weren't just reacting. To one person, they were comparing both sides. This is where the situation turned from controversy into full-scale drama. Because once both voices are involved, every detail becomes more important. People started analyzing tone, timing, and the way things were said, looking for clues about what's really going on. And in that process, even small details started gaining attention that they wouldn't normally get. That level of scrutiny only made the situation more intense than the past came back into play. Because the internet never forgets anything old. Clips started resurfacing. Previous situations got pulled back into the spotlight. And suddenly, this moment was being compared to everything that came before it. That created a sense of pattern for some viewers, while others argued it was being taken out of proportion. Either way, It added another layer of complexity to the situation. Now, the conversation wasn't just about what was said in the present. It became about history, behavior, and how everything connects. That kind of shift makes things much harder to resolve because people aren't just focused on one moment anymore. They're looking at the bigger picture, and that picture doesn't always lead to agreement. Instead, it usually leads to even more division at this stage. The internet had fully locked into the situation and wasn't letting go. Every update, every reaction, every new piece of information became part of the ongoing story. And because there was no clear resolution, people stayed engaged longer than usual. That's how situations like this go from trending topics to ongoing narratives that people follow like a series. But even with all the noise, one thing remained unclear. Nobody actually knew the full truth behind what was happening. And that uncertainty is what kept everything moving forward instead of settling down. Because when people don't have all the answers, they keep searching for them. And in that search, the conversation continues to grow. Now, everything is set up for something bigger, because situations like this rarely end where they start. The tension has already built, the sides have already formed, and the audience is already invested. That combination usually leads to an escalation that takes things to a completely different level. And if the reaction so far is anything to go by, what comes next might be even more intense than what we've already seen. So the real question isn't whether the situation will continue, because it already has momentum behind it. The real question is how far it's going to go before it finally reaches a breaking point. And judging by how fast things have moved so far, that breaking point might be closer than anyone expects. And just when people thought the situation had already peaked, the internet decided to take things to a whole different level. Because what started as one controversial statement and one strong clapback suddenly turned into a full-scale digital war. This wasn't just trending anymore. This was dominating timelines, group chats, and comment sections like it was the only story that existed. And once that level of attention hits, things don't slow down. They multiply in ways nobody can control. TikTok wasted no time turning the situation into pure viral fuel, breaking everything down into clips that spread faster than the original moment. Edits started popping up with dramatic music, slow zooms, and captions that made everything feel 10 times more intense than it already was. People were replaying specific seconds, analyzing facial expressions, tone shifts, and even pauses, like they were decoding hidden meaning. And once that kind of content takes over, it creates an entirely new version of the story. Then Twitter stepped in and did what it does best, turning the situation into a nonstop debate with no clear ending. Threads started appearing with detailed breakdowns, opinions framed like arguments, and takes that ranged from thoughtful to completely unfiltered. Some people tried to bring logic into the conversation, while others leaned fully into the chaos and made it as dramatic as possible. And because everyone could respond instantly, the conversation never paused long enough to cool down at the same time. The meme culture took over in a way that only the internet can deliver. Jokes started flying from every direction, comparing the situation to reality shows, courtroom drama, and even scripted series where the plot keeps twisting unexpectedly. People turned serious moments into punchlines, and those punchlines spread just as fast as the original clips. But even while people were laughing, the underlying tension never actually disappeared as the conversation kept expanding. Influencers and online personalities started stepping in with their own takes. These weren't quiet opinions either. They were loud, confident, and designed to spark reactions. Some supported Blueface and argued that the internet was overreacting without knowing the full story. Others supported the baby mama and framed the situation as something that should be taken seriously instead of turned into entertainment. And once those voices joined in, their audiences amplified everything even more. Now the situation had multiple, layers happening at once, and each one was moving at its own speed. You had reaction content, serious discussion, humor, and speculation all blending together into one massive conversation. And because there was no single narrative controlling it, people started choosing the version they believed in the most. That's when things become unpredictable. Because everyone is operating with a slightly different understanding of what's happening. Then came the contradictions, which pushed everything even further into chaos. Different clips started circulating that seemed to show different angles or slightly different meanings behind what was said. Some people claimed context was missing, while others insisted the message was clear no matter how you looked at it. And once those contradictions entered the conversation, it became almost impossible to settle on one interpretation at this point. The internet wasn't just reacting anymore, it was creating its own storyline. People started connecting details, building timelines, and filling in gaps with their own assumptions. Some of those assumptions made sense. Others were completely exaggerated, but all of them spread at the same speed. And once that kind of narrative building starts, doesn't matter what's confirmed or not, the conversation keeps growing anyway. Meanwhile, the back and forth energy between both sides kept the tension at a constant high. Every response triggered another reaction, and every reaction pulled more people into the discussion. It felt less like a single moment and more like an ongoing series where each update added a new layer to the story. And just like any series, the audience kept waiting for the next episode to drop. Then celebrities and public figures started getting indirectly pulled into the situation, even without making direct statements. A like here, a comment there, a repost that seemed harmless but suddenly carried meaning. Fans started analyzing those interactions like they were clues, trying to figure out who was supporting who. And once that kind of speculation starts, it creates even more engagement because people want to feel like they're uncovering something. But even with all the noise, one thing became very clear. Nobody actually had a complete understanding of what was happening behind the scenes. Everything being discussed was based on clips, reactions, and interpretations rather than confirmed details. And that gap between what people know and what they think they know is exactly what keeps situations like this alive for so long. Then came the shift into theory mode, which completely changed how people engaged with the situation. Instead of just reacting to what was already said, people started asking what it could mean for the future. Was this just a moment that got blown out of proportion, or was it the beginning of something bigger? That question alone kept people watching closely, waiting for any sign of what might come next. Some believed the situation would fade once the attention moved on to something else, while others believed it was building toward a bigger reveal. And because both outcomes felt possible, the uncertainty kept everyone engaged. Every small update became important, even if it didn't seem significant on its own. That's how situations move from trending topics to ongoing stories that people follow closely. Meanwhile, Blueface's lack of detailed clarification added another layer to everything. Instead of fully explaining or shutting down the conversation, the silence left room for more interpretation. Some saw it as confidence, others saw it as avoidance, and a few believed it was intentional. And each of those interpretations created a different narrative that people could choose to follow. The baby mama's response, on the other hand, continued to shape the conversation in a different way. Her presence in the situation kept the focus from shifting too far in one direction. Every time the conversation leaned one way, her side brought it back into balance by adding another perspective. That dynamic is what kept the situation from settling down, because both sides remained active in the discussion. At this stage, the internet wasn't just watching anymore. It was fully invested in how the situation would unfold. People weren't just reacting to updates, they were anticipating them. That anticipation created a level of engagement that doesn't fade quickly. And once that level is reached, the story usually continues evolving instead of ending. Now everything feels like it's building towards something that hasn't happened yet. The tension is still there, the attention is still high, and the audience is still watching closely. That combination usually leads to a moment where everything changes suddenly. And if that moment is coming, it could shift the entire conversation in a completely new direction. So while it may seem like everything has already happened, the reality is that this might just be the middle of the story. Because situations like this rarely end without one final twist that redefines everything. And if that twist does arrive, it could make everything we've seen so far feel like just the setup for something even bigger. And just when the chaos felt like it had reached its absolute peak, everything shifted into something even more intense. Not louder in the usual sense, but heavier in a way that made people stop for a second and actually process what they were watching. Because after all the reactions, memes, arguments, and viral clips, the situation started moving out of pure entertainment and into something that felt a lot more real. And when that shift happens, the energy changes fast. The conversation didn't disappear or calm down, but it evolved into something deeper and more complicated. People started stepping back from the noise and looking at the bigger picture instead of just reacting to single moments. That's when the tone across the internet began to split in a completely different way. You still had the loud, chaotic side pushing jokes and opinions, but underneath that, a more serious discussion started growing. Supporters began leaning into a more grounded defense, focusing less on hype and more on understanding. They started talking about pressure, public life, and how constant scrutiny can shape decisions in ways people don't always see. Their arguments shifted toward empathy, emphasizing that situations like this aren't as simple as they look online. And that perspective started gaining attention from people who hadn't engaged before at the same time. Critics didn't disappear or lose momentum, but their approach became sharper and more structured. Instead of reacting emotionally, they began presenting their points in a more calculated way. They focused on patterns, consistency, and long-term impact rather than just the moment itself. That shift made the debate feel more serious, because now both sides were arguing with intention instead of impulse. That's when the narrative fully split into multiple directions, creating confusion across the entire conversation. Some people saw Blueface as someone speaking without filters, while others saw his statement as something that carries real consequences. And because both perspectives had strong arguments behind them, the audience couldn't settle on a single conclusion. That uncertainty kept the situation alive longer than expected. Then something unexpected started happening that changed the tone yet again in a subtle but powerful way. The conversation didn't just stay intense or dramatic, it started becoming emotional in a more genuine sense. People began expressing concern instead of just criticism, and discussions shifted toward responsibility and long-term impact. That moment of reflection didn't erase the chaos, but it added a new layer to it. For a brief period, it felt like the internet might actually slow down and process everything more thoughtfully. But that calm didn't last long, because the nature of viral situations is to keep evolving instead of settling. Just as the tone began to stabilize, new details and interpretations started emerging again. And those small changes were enough to push everything back into motion. People began noticing subtle differences in how both sides were responding and presenting their perspectives. These weren't major announcements or dramatic statements, but small shifts that caught attention quickly. And once those details started circulating, they created a new wave of speculation. That speculation didn't replace the existing conversation. It added another layer on top of it. Now, the situation wasn't just about what had already happened. It became about what might happen next. People started forming theories, connecting dots, and predicting outcomes based on incomplete information. Some of those theories were logical, while others were exaggerated, but all of them spread quickly. And once the conversation reaches that stage, it becomes more about anticipation than reaction. That anticipation is what kept the audience fully locked into the situation without losing interest. Instead of waiting for closure, people were waiting for the next development that could change everything. Every small update started feeling important, even if it didn't provide clear answers. That's how situations extend beyond their initial moment and become ongoing narratives. Meanwhile, Blueface remained at the center of everything without fully addressing all the speculation surrounding him. That lack of detailed response created space for multiple interpretations to exist at the same time. Some people saw it as confidence, others saw it as avoidance, and a few believed it was a strategic move. And each interpretation influenced how people reacted moving forward. On the other side, the baby mama's presence continued shaping the direction of the conversation. Her responses kept the situation balanced between two perspectives instead of allowing one narrative to dominate completely. Every time the discussion leaned in one direction, her side brought it back into a more complex space. That dynamic is treasure. What kept the situation from settling into a clear conclusion at this stage? The entire situation felt like it was building toward something that hadn't happened yet. The tension was still present, the attention was still high, and the audience was still engaged. That combination usually leads to a moment where everything shifts suddenly. And when that shift happens, tends to redefine the entire narrative. Because if there's one pattern, the internet always follows. It's that viral situations rarely end quietly. They build, evolve, and then deliver one final moment that changes how everything is viewed. And right now, it feels like this situation is approaching that exact point. The only thing missing is the moment that ties everything together. So the real question isn't what already happened, because the internet has already explored every angle of that. The real question is what comes next and how it will impact everything people believe right now. Because if a new development appears, it could either confirm the current narrative or completely shift it. And that possibility is exactly what keeps people watching. If the next move changes the story in a major way, then everything we've seen so far will feel like the setup rather than the main event. And if that happens, the reaction could be even bigger than what we've already witnessed. That's the unpredictable nature of moments like this. They don't follow a clear path. They evolve in ways nobody can fully predict. So as the situation stands now, one thing is certain above everything else. This isn't over. It's just in a stage where everything is building toward something bigger. And when that moment finally arrives, it won't just continue the story. It will redefine it in a way that nobody is fully prepared for yet. Now, let's be honest for a second, because if you made it all the way through this chaos, you're already invested whether you want to admit it or not. You've seen the clips, you've heard the arguments, and you've probably formed an opinion that you're ready to defend in the comments. This situation didn't just pop up and disappear, it pulled everybody in and refused to let go. If you're still here, that means you're locked into the story just like everyone else watching. So go ahead and do what you already know you're about to do anyway. Smash that like button like it owes you money and drop your opinion below. Don't hold back either, because this is one of those moments where every perspective adds to the conversation. Whether you're defending, questioning, or just observing, your take matters in the middle of all this chaos. And let's be real. The comments section is where things get even more interesting. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is definitely the time to fix that. Because situations like this don't just end in one video. There's always another twist, another reaction, and another moment that takes everything to the next level. And if you're not tapped in, you're going to miss the updates while everyone else is already talking about them. Staying ahead of the drama means staying connected to every part of the story. Turn those notifications on so you don't miss a single update. Because the next move in this situation could drop at any time. And when it does, it might completely change everything you thought you understood so far. That's how fast things move when the internet gets involved at this level. One moment can flip the entire narrative overnight. This is Secret Scoop, where the drama doesn't fade away quietly. It builds, evolves, and takes over everything in its path.